Ready? Ready?
Shep!
A wave of numbness surged through my body with stunning force. At last, I knew what it felt like to be sitting there with that brass hat on your skull with those straps around your ankles while the warden pulled the big switch.
I was finished. Done. It had all come to this. Somehow I always known it would.
It all started in the first grade at Warren G. Harding School, where I was among a rabble of sweaty, wrestling peanut butter and jelly sandwich eaters. But it was not until the end of the third month in school that I became dimly aware of a curse that would follow me throughout my life, along with
Martin Perlmutter.
Here.
Schwartz.
Here.
Chester Wozniewski.
Here.
Helen Weathers.
Here.
And Francis Xavier Zambarbareri.
I was a member of the alphabetical ghetto that sat in the back of the classroom.
Madam Science is now beginning to realize that those at the end of the alphabet live shorter lives,
sweat more, and are far dumpier than those in the B's and the E's, and even the M's and L's.
People at the tail of the alphabet growing up accepting the fact that everybody else comes first.
The Warren G. Harding School had an almost mystic belief in the alphabet. If you were a P, you sat behind every O, regardless of myopia.
Me and Schwartz and Wozniewski, well, we sat so far back in the classroom that the blackboard was a vague rumor to us.
Miss Shields, the teacher.
was a shifting figure in the haze of the distant horizon.
The voice of faint but ominous drone, punctuated by squeaking chalk.
And within a short time, I became adept at reading the inflection, if not the content of those far-off sounds, sensing instantly when danger was looming.
Danger meant simply being called upon.
Kids in the front of the classroom didn't know the meaning of danger.
ACE test takers. They love nothing more than to display their immense amount of knowledge, waving their hands frantically, even before questions were asked.
They were the smartasses who went on to become corporate presidents, talk show TV hosts, owner of cabin cruisers.
We in the back of the classroom followed a different path.
Since we could neither hear nor see, we had only one course open if we were going to pass reasonable grades.
First of all, it was imperative never to be caught out in the open, and if possible, not to be seen at all.
Each one of us had evolved our own special methods of survival.
Helen Weathers was so nervous, her expression so sad, her profuse perspiration under stress so pathetic that the teacher never had the heart to call on her.
Chester Wozniewski hid behind books all the time, and that worked all right until one day he hid behind.
Plastic Man meets the Thing.
Perlmutter, he had the kind of face you can't remember even when you're looking at it, so he didn't have to hide.
One day during an oral quiz, though,
Always a dangerous time for all of us.
Perlmutter displayed the stuff of champions.
Miss Shields unaccountably called on him during an incomprehensible discussion of isosceles triangles.
We thought Perlmutter was finished, but we had underestimated him.
now, without missing a beat, his face turned bright purple. His eyes bulged like a pair of overripe grapes. His neck throbbed.
And a spectacular geyser of blood gushed from both nostrils.
Terrible! Miss Shields shouted.
She scooped him up in her muscular arms and rushed him down to the nurse's office, where he was excused for the rest of the day.
She never called on him again.
Sam Barbieri, a devoted Catholic, relied almost exclusively on prayer.
But in her case, it was academics, and she sat so far back in the classroom, deep among the galoshes, that even we couldn't see her.
Schwartz employed the simple but effective technique of slowly lowering himself in his seat until only his crew cut showed above the top of his desk during risky periods of interrogation.
I made it a point to wear bland-colored clothes, better to blend into the background.
I learned to weave my body from side to side, dropping a shoulder here, shifting my neck a few to the right there, with the crucial object in mind of keeping a line of kids between me and the teacher's eagle eye.
The last and possibly most important tactic for classroom survival was thought control.
When danger loomed, it was necessary to repeat silently, with intense concentration, the hypnotic command.
You will not call on me. You will not call on me.
This would send out invisible waves of powerful thought energy, until the mind of the teacher was mysteriously clouded. After endless hours of rehearsal, though, before the bathroom mirror, I developed my fourth and final gambit.
My cute look.
The shy, boyish smile of such disarming cuddliness as to be lethal in its effectiveness.
I flashed it, of course, only under great caution. During crucial moments, like when Miss Shields would fill out my report card, I knew my cute look would pop into her mind, and that's all I needed.
And since she had nothing else to go on, it was only natural for her to put down
A B. That's all I ever wanted out of life.
So it was that I weaved and bobbed, truckled, and beamed my way through grade after grade at Warren G. Harding Elementary School. Perlmutter, Schwartz, Wisniewski, Helen Weathers, and I, as well as
Poor Francis, Xavier's, and Barbieri.
sat on the shore as a deep river of education flowed by us, unheard, unseen. The years passed, punctuated by occasional tight squeaks.
But my true identity as a faker was never really in danger. Finally, the big day came.
Graduation! We sang the Warren G. Harding fight song, accompanied by Miss Bundy, our kindergarten teacher, on the piano.
Then a famous local undertaker and Chevrolet dealer delivered a mind-numbing oration on
How his generation was passing the torch of civilization from its faltering hands into our youthful, energetic, and idealistic hands.
Naturally, we were seated alphabetically, and we in the rear caught only a few disjointed phrases.
Schwartz, sweating profusely in his new sports coat, whispered, "What's all that stuff about torches? I didn't get no torch."
I don't know. Probably gave it to the front of the class.
But I got my diploma. It was official. I was a graduate. That summer sped by in a blur.
In September, I'd be a full-fledged high school kid.
Guys in high school had always seemed to be remote, godlike creatures who played all sports, wore thick sweaters with letters on them, and hung around Big Bill's Drive-In.
What actually happened in junior high and high school? Well, that was never really mentioned, at least among those of us down the R's and the Y's.
The first evil omen struck early in September, just a few days before school was to open.
There's some mail for you!
My mother said.
Ma'am? For me?
I was surprised, since I received very little mail except for an occasional announcement from the
International Crime Detection Institute of East St. Louis, Illinois, informing me that I was frittering my life away when I could be earning big bucks spotting crooks.
I ripped open the envelope and found a printed form stating that
High school registration and classes would begin next Monday, and I was assigned to Miss Snyder, to whom I would report at 8:30 a.m. period. Hey, Schwartz!
I barked into the telephone.
Did you get your card?
Yeah, Schwartz said.
What's this registration stuff?
I don't really know. I guess it's where you pick your teachers and classes and all the stuff you get to take.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, the dreams of youth. Finally, registration day had dawned.
Schwartz and Helen and Chester and the whole crowd of us rode the bus to school. We carried rulers and fountain pens and erasers.
A full arsenal of equipment for use on the battlefields of higher learning.
Schwartz had a T-square made of red plastic and a matching compass. Who knows what for?
I clutched a brown and white fake marble Parker automatic pencil that my Aunt Glenn had given me for graduation from 6th grade.
I was ready for anything.
I had lain in bed, making plans for the night before. I would grab the front seat this time in every class, and I started listening to every word. No longer would I do that duck and dodge behind the screen of kids. All behind me now.
That's right. The bus rolled up and pulled out. Oh, some on the run yelling hysterically, others ashen-faced and stiff-legged with terror.
And a few pretended it was just like any other bus ride.
The school loomed over us like the walls of the Grand Canyon. Made of dull red brick, it stretched out in either horizon.
Thousands of kids milled around the outside, waiting for the doors to open. And girls bigger than my Aunt Clara towered over me, and they had bumps in their sweaters, like Gene Autry used to sing to in his cowboy TV shows.
A blind torrent of fear washed over me. For a while, I had been one of the truly big men at Warren G. Harding, and now
I was nothing. Clinging to my lunch bag with a sweaty hand, I hunted frantically for a familiar face, but Schwartz and Martin and the others, well, they'd been swallowed up.
Bring! I was carried forward on the crest of the horde as it surged in through the front doors. Grand staircases with rivers of kids streamed in every direction.
My card read, report to room 220. Kids all around me hollered and they laughed back and forth.
They all seemed to know one another.
Never felt so alone. The hall stretched so far in both directions that I couldn't even see the end. And the lockers banged and I smelled for the first time
that indescribable junior high school building aroma. A rich fragrance made up of thousands of bodies, floor wax, chalk, leftover tuna fish sandwiches, chlorine from the swimming pool, disinfectant from the bathrooms, and fermenting jock straps from the gym. I tried to read the numbers on the doors and I was swept forward like a stick in a rushing river.
205, that was 207, 214, 218, 220.
My homeroom. A plump lady with gray clothes, hair, face, sat like an enigmatic Buddha at a gray metal desk at the head of the room.
Somehow I sensed that she wasn't going to be a pushover for my cute look. I turned it on anyway. Full candle power.
She glanced up and peered at me coldly through her glasses. Your card, please. Take that seat back there behind Rakowski. He's the one in the purple sweater.
I walked down between the aisle, all these alien faces to my seat.
It was, of course, in the next to the last row, and it would be mine for the next 4 years.
I peered around the room, and I was the only delegate for room 220 at Warren G. Harding Elementary.
Miss Snyder stood at the blackboard and said, "You students are already enrolled for your courses you will be required to take. Here are your program cards."
She dealt out these 3x5 blue cards. Each was neatly lined. I had 8 periods, and after each period was the name of a teacher, a subject, and a classroom. One was labeled lunch, another study. Every minute of my day was laid out for me, though.
So much for the dreams of freedom. I sat there in silence, staring at my blue card, lost in dark thoughts when the bell rang.
Snyder spoke. "Students, this is your first day in high school. You are no longer in grade school. If you work hard, you will do well, and if you don't, you will regret it. First class will begin in 5 minutes. Any questions?"
The starting gate had opened. I was thundered a couple of 100 feet and through the hall, and a mob hit me, and then I realized, well, I have no idea where I'm going.
As the crowd surged around me, I struggled to read my program. All I could make out was room 127. I only had a minute to make it. 101, 105, 109, 117, 127. Just in time. Already the classroom was 3/4 full.
It was Schwartz and Martin and Chester and Helen Weathers and the old gang. I was even poor old Francis Xavier Zambarbieri. Whatever this was, I wasn't having to go through it alone.
Schwartz smiled weakly.
Helen Weathers giggled until she saw.
At the same time that I did.
Miss Prittinger, standing motionless at the blackboard. All right, settle down. Let's get organized. We sit alphabetically in this class. A's up here in the front to my right. Get going.
I trudged behind Schwartz and Helen Weathers towards the dim recesses in the back of the classroom. At least I'd be among friends. I was a quarter of a mile to the front of the classroom.
But I sat bolt upright in my seat, determined to catch every word that the teacher said.
Class, my name is Miss Prittinger.
Still had no idea what she taught.
I would soon find out.
If you work hard in this class, you'll have no trouble. If you don't, I promise you nothing.
I leaned forward at my desk, scribbling madly in my notebook.
Class, my name is Miss Prittinger. If you work hard, you'll have no trouble. If you don't, I promise you nothing.
She turned, picked up a piece of chalk, and began to scrawl in huge block letters on the blackboard.
A-L-G-E-B A. I copied each letter exactly as she'd written it.
This is the subject of our course.
Schwartz asked aloud, algebra, what the heck is that?
Algebra is the mathematics of abstract numbers. I will now illustrate. If y equals 5 and x equals 2, what does the following mean? X plus y equals...
I'm sorry. How the hell can you add x's and y's?
I had enough trouble with 2s and 3s. Already the crowd in the front of the room was waving their hands to Miss Pritchenger's question.
The class was not 30 seconds old, and I was already 6 weeks behind. I sank lower into my seat, faint buzzing in my ears. I began to instinctively weave. I knew it was all over.
Schwartz hunched lower and began to emit a high, then whimpering sound.
Cousin Weathers had flung up a thin spray of sweat.
Mr. Skin had changed the colors of the cupboards in the back of the room.
And from behind me, I could hear Francis Xavier Zambarbieri's prayer beads on her desk.
Second by second, minute by minute, eon by eon, that first algebra class droned on. I realized that for the first time, I had run into something that was completely opaque, completely unlearnable.
And there was no way to fake it.
That night, I ate in sober silence as the family yapped on, still living back in the days when I was known to all of them as the smartest son of a bee to ever set foot in Cleveland Street.
Boy, would you look at the stuff these kids are learning these days.
My father said as he hefted my algebra book in his bowling hand and rifled through the pages.
What is this X and Y stuff?
It ain't much.
What do you mean it ain't much?
His eyes glowed with pride at the idea that his kid had mastered algebra in one day.
Abstract mathematics, that's all it is.
The old man knew he'd been totally outclassed. Even my mother stopped stirring gravy for a few seconds.
That night, sleep did not come easily.
In fact, it was the first of many sleepless nights to come as algebra class came, my terror grew.
All my other subjects were even a total breeze, though.
My years of experience in fakery came into full flower.
In social studies, for example, the more you hooked it up, the better the grades.
On those rare occasions when I was asked a question, I would stand slowly with an open yet troubled look and say,
Miss Harris, ma'am, I guess it depends on how you view it. Objectively, which naturally is too simple, or subjectively, in that case, too many factors could be determined.
Miss Harris, with a snort of pleasure, would go out and say, right, there are many diverse elements, which,
After she was good for at least a 40-minute solo.
Every morning at 8:35, however, was another story. I marched with leaden feet and quaking bowels into Mrs. Pritchenger's torture chamber.
By the 6th week, though, I knew without the shadow of a doubt, without all these years of dodging and grinning, I was going to fail. I'd fail. True, Pritchenger had not yet caught me out in the open. I was using every trick of the trade, though.
But I knew that one day, inevitably, the icy hand of truth would expose me for the entire world to see.
Pritchenger was of the new school, meaning she believed that kids theoretically motivated by an insatiable thirst for knowledge would devour algebra in large chunks, making the final examination only a formality. They were graded on performance in class.
Since I had no classroom performance, my doom was sealed.
Schwartz fell into the non-performance category, too.
Helen had developed deep hollows under her eyes.
While Chester had almost completely disappeared. Zambarbieri had taken to feverishly consuming communion wafers during class.
The first hints of spring began to appear. Birds twittered, flower buds unfurled, but men on death row are impervious to such intimations of life quickening. Soon, everyone would know.
Everyone would know that I knew less about algebra than Ralph, Miss Gammy's big Airedale, who liked to pee on my mother's rose bushes.
Prittinger had informed them that the final exam, covering a year's work in algebra, would be given on Friday the following week.
One more week of stardom on Cleveland Street.
Ever since my devastating rejoinder at the dinner table about abstract mathematics, my stock had been the hottest in the neighborhood. My opinions were asked on financial matters, world affairs, even the infield problems of the Chicago White Sox.
Even Ralph would have more respect than I deserve. At least he didn't pretend to be anything but what he was.
Wednesday, 2 days before the end, it arrived like any other spring day. A faint breeze drifted in from the south, bringing with it hints of long summer afternoons to come. Swung bats, nights playing outside in the lilac bushes.
I stumped into algebra class, distinctly feeling like the last soul aboard the sinking Titanic as she was about to plunge to the bottom. I took my seat in the back among the rest of the condemned.
The class began. Prittinger's chalk squeaked, hands waved. My knot of fear, by now an old friend, sputtered in my gut.
In the past week, it had grown to roughly the size of a $2 watermelon.
True, I had avoided being called on even once, the entire year. But it was a hollow victory, and I knew it.
Minute after minute inched slowly by as I ducked and I dodged Prittinger firing question after question. Glancing at my Mickey Mouse watch, which I had been given for Christmas, I noted with deep relief that there's only 2 minutes left before the bell.
It was then that I made my fatal mistake. The mistake that all guerrilla fighters eventually make.
I broke cover!
On this fateful Wednesday, lulled by the sun, the gentle sound of the tennis ball, by the steady drone of Prittinger's voice, by the fact that there was just 2 minutes to go, my mind slowly drifted off into the haze of a daydream. I spotted a tiny mote of dust floating down through a slant of a sunbeam. I watched it in its slow, undulating flight, like some microscopic silver bird.
Shep! For a second, I thought I had been jabbed by an electric cattle prod.
Prittinger's voice, loud and commanding, was pronouncing his name.
Oh, she was calling on me. Oh, no. Not with a single minute to go. She had nailed me.
I heard Schwartz bleat a high, quavering laugh. I knew what that meant.
Oh no, if they gotten him, the master of us all, there's no hope for any of us.
As I stood at my seat, frantically biting for time, I saw a great puddle forming beneath Helen Weather's desk. It wasn't all sweat.
Tears got sunk to the floor beneath her desk.
And Francis Sandbarbier's teeth were clattering so loud you could hardly hear her Hail Marys.
Come to the board, please. If x equals 2 and y equals -1, what is the value of c in this equation?
At the board,
Totally unfamiliar territory to me.
I stared at what seemed like the first equation I had ever seen.
It was well over 1.5 yards long.
And it was lacerated by mysterious crooked lines and fractions and parentheses, with miniature 2s and 3s hovering above the whole thing like tiny barnacles. X's and Y's were jumbled and crazy abandon, and at the end of this nightmare was a tiny equal sign. And on the other end of that sign was a 0.
0? Oh, this credit backs up to nothing.
Prittinger stood to one side, arms folded, wearing an expression that said, "At last I've nailed the little bastard."
I glanced back at the class. It was one of the truly educational moments of my life.
And the entire mob at Schwartz, Chester, Francis Xavier Zambarbieri, they were all grinning happily, even licking their chops at my imminent crucifixion.
When true disaster strikes, we have no friends.
And there's nothing a phony loves more in this world than to see another phony get what's coming to him.
The value of C, please.
The equation blurred before my eyes. The value of C? What the heck was it? What did the C look like anyway? Or an A or a B? Oh, good heavens, I'd forgotten the alphabet.
C, please.
Oh, desperately. I tried to come up with a number. I mean, any number.
The answer, please.
I can't even remember my name. Oh, my watering eyes, they started to scan the classroom in vain for a sympathetic face, and finally I focused on Helen's purple sweater.
There was a big block number on it.
3.
What's that?
3?
Prisoner staggered backward. Her glasses jolted down to the tip of her nose. How in the world did you know that?
The class was in an uproar. I caught a glimpse of Schwartz, his face pale with shock. I had caught one on the fat part of the bat. It was a true miracle. I had walked on water.
Instantly, though, the old instincts took over. In a cool, level voice, I answered Brittinger's rhetorical question. Man, I answered the equation with empirical means.
The bell rang. Class was over.
The swiftness born a long experience. I was out of the room before even the echo of the bell had ceased. The gorilla's code is always hit and run.
A legend had been born. That afternoon, as I sauntered home from school, feeling at least 12 and a half feet tall,
Schwartz skulked next to him, silent, moody, kicking at passing frogs.
With the benign air of a baron bestowing largesse upon a wretched serf, I offered to buy Schwartz a fudgesicle.
Schwartz refused with a snarl.
Oh, why, Schwartz, what seems to be troubling you?
You phony jerk, he said to him. You know what you can do with your stupid fudgesicle, you son of a bitch.
Me? A phony? Why would you say an unkind thing like that?
You fake. You studied.
Inevitably, those of us who are gifted, well, we must leave those less fortunate behind in the races of life.
The next morning, Thursday, I swaggered into algebra class with my head held high.
Miss Prittinger, her eyes glowing with admiration, smiled warmly at him.
Hi, Pitt. I said with a casual flip of my hand. We abstract mathematicians, we have an unspoken bond.
Naturally, I was not called on during that period. After all, I had proved myself beyond any doubt.
After class, beaming at me with the intimacy of a fellow zealot, Miss Prittinger asked me to stay on for a few moments.
Look, it'd be pointless for my only A-plus student to waste time on our little test tomorrow. Would you mind helping me grade the papers?
Ah, gosh, Pitt, I was looking forward to it, but if you really need me, I'll be glad to help.
It was a masterstroke.
I'd appreciate it, she said. I need somebody who really knows his stuff. And most of these kids are faking it.
2 days later, together, we graded the papers of my peers.
I showed no mercy, since algebra, of course, is an absolute science.
And there could be no margin of mercy in matters, or kindness in matters of the mind.